Here is a video about hedging, which is a feature of academic writing. Now, before I define what hedging is, I would like to be clear about something. Now, academic writing is writing that is meant to convey facts and information and have added in a precise way. This is very important. Academic writing is precise. And again, nobody cares about your opinions necessarily, but we want facts. And it's important that when we can be precise, we are precise. But then a feature of academic language is something called hedging. Now, what is hedging? Well, it can be defined as cautious or vague language. Now you might think, this is confusing. Didn't you just say that academic language should be precise, and now you're saying it should be vague? That doesn't make sense. Well, it does. Academic language is in general precise, but sometimes we need to be vague. So let's have a closer look at, when is it that we need to be vague or use hedging, as it's called in academic language. Here are some examples of vague language. So the first one is a statement which reads, I can promise that we shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that the situation is resolved in a way that is fair to all the parties involved. This is maybe a typical sort of politician's answer. If they're confronted about, what are you going to do about this? And they can say, well, we should take all appropriate measures and fair to all the parties involved. It's really vague because it doesn't specify what kind of measures. And fair to all the parties involved, like in what way? If there are people or parties that are in a conflict, like what is fair to one isn't necessarily fair to the other. So this is language that is intentionally vague, right? Because then you sort of, you have a way out, you don't really commit. And when a politician says something like that, if they're later confronted with, well, why didn't you do anything? They could say, well, I said that I was going to take appropriate measures. Yeah, but why didn't you do this? You said that you were going to do this. No, I said no such thing. I just said appropriate measures, and then they can later define what that is. So it's not only a feature of academic writing, it's also a feature of, for example, political language. Politicians are very good at this, being vague when confronted with certain things. But in academic writing, we should try to be vague in a different way. So if we look at these other words that I've listed here, many, early, hot, most, poor student, very rich, soon, these are examples of typical vague expressions that we should try to avoid when we use academic language. I said, when you can be precise, you should be. So many, like what is many? That depends a lot on the context, doesn't it? I have a rather small house, so many people over would be like, if I have 30 people over, that's many people. But if you say many people speak English today, well, then many means close to 2 billion people, which is many, many more than the 30 people I could fill my house with. So instead of many, say 1,000 or 500 to 1,000 or between 2 and 3 million people, depending on how many refer to. Early, be specific. When is early? I think 5 a.m. is early. Hot, instead of saying hot, say 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then most. What is most? Like most people voted in the last election. Like what is most? Is it like over 50? Is that a majority? Is that most? Or is it like 89.9 or 95? Like if you know the percentage, say that instead. If you're not 100% sure, use approximately 1/3 of the population, or approximately 2/3 if it's most. 1/3, it would definitely not be most. Instead of saying poor students, say like students that have an average of 2.2, right? Like not poor in terms of money, but poor in terms of alltså dålig karakterer. Instead of saying like very rich, what is very rich anyway? Is it if you're a millionaire, or do you have to be a billionaire to be very rich these days? And when is soon? Like don't say soon, say 7 p.m. Tuesday. So as I said, academic language is precise. It's precise about the information that we give, and it's also precise about where we have that information from, right? So don't say some people say, or don't say some researchers. Be specific. Which researchers is it that claims this? So when should you use vague language in academic writing then? Well, you should use vague language, or rather hedging, to be honest with your readers about the strength of the claims you are making. So, for example, if you look at the first sentence here, the commitment to some of the social and economic concepts was less strong in the 70s than it is now. Here, something is presented as a fact. The commitment was less strong in the 70s than it is now. So here, was less strong. This is like, it seems like this is a fact. This is something that everybody agrees on. If you look at the second sentence, it reads, it may be said that the commitment, and then blah, 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 the rest is the same. Now, the difference here is that in the second sentence, the writer has used hedging because, you know, maybe we can't be so sure that the commitment was less strong. So we sort of hedge, which means we add a sort of vague language, or cautious language, maybe it's a better term than vague, to signal to the reader that this isn't something that is 100% certain. Here is a list of words that are typically used to hedge. So we have different kinds of verbs. You see that we have introductory verbs and certain modal verbs. And then we have adverbs of frequency, how often something happens. And then we have modal adverbs, adjectives, and modal nouns, and sort of that clauses. If you look in the past example here, it's a that clause. It may be said that, and that's how they've hedged in this sentence. So introductory verbs seem, tend, look like, appear to be, indicate, suggest. So instead of saying the research shows, you can say that this research indicates or suggests, right? Because it might be very clear in the research or in the study, but we need more studies and we need more research to know for a fact if this is true. Modal verbs: would, must, may, might, could. You know, this may be a fact instead of this is a fact. And then something about it doesn't happen always, but it happens often, sometimes, usually. And then you see modal adverbs and adjectives. You see it's the same words, but they are different parts of speech. So certain actually is the same, whether you use it as an adjective or an adverb. But definite is the adjective, definitely is the adverb, probable, probably, possible, possibly, perhaps, conceivably, and so on. So it depends on how you use them in a sentence, whether sometimes we need the adjective. You know, remember, adjective modifies nouns, whereas adverbs modifies verbs or adjectives. And then we also have some modal nouns: assumptions, possibility, probability. So we can say that it's a probability, right, that this is the case. Then we're saying that it's likely, but we don't know for sure. And the last one, it could be the case that. So when these are words that you can use if you want to signal to your reader that this isn't something I'm 100% sure of, or again, academic writing is about presenting facts and information, but you know, it's not always that we know everything for certain. We might need to be a bit more cautious. All right, so here are the sources that I've used for this presentation. So you can go to these pages, especially this last one here, and learn more about hedging and other features of academic language.